Hello, this is cjhoyle. Today is Monday, August the 30th, 2021, and welcome to day 3 of my solo canoeing adventure on the Rideau Canal. So the time is currently about 6:15 a.m. and I'm here at Chaffey's Lock on the Rideau Canal, lock number 37, and I spent the evening camped over here in my tent, and it was a relatively quiet night with just a couple of light raindrops throughout the night. So I'm just starting to get ready for the morning, which includes making a stop over here at the restroom building, which is located within that little white extension over there of the old historic lockmaster's house. So the time is now about 6:45, and I've got my entire campsite all packed up there. The next step is for me to get the canoe and carry it over to this dock over here, where I'll get in the water and I'll begin paddling in that direction, heading upstream to the next lake. Starting from here at the Chaffey's Lockstation, my plan for today is to continue following along the route of the Rideau Canal with the goal of making it as far as Big Rideau Lake, where I'm hoping to camp on Colonel By Island. Alright, so here I am on the water and making my way through these narrows towards a lake called Indian Lake. Here's more of that Brown's Marina that I saw yesterday that has the general store over there on the road. Up ahead I've got a bridge to paddle underneath of. This bridge used to belong to a branch of the CN rail line, but it's since been converted into a recreational trail called the Cataraqui Trail. The trail runs from just outside of Napanee to the community of Smith Falls, where I'll be visiting later in this trip. And as I round this corner into Indian Lake, I can feel that there's a strong wind from the west, which should be helpful to me later this afternoon. So far, Indian Lake seems like another lake of many islands. According to the map, this island here is called Rocky Island. There's nothing quite like paddling first thing in the morning. Some mornings things are really calm and still, but it's actually quite windy this morning, but still really great to be out enjoying this. So there's a look across Indian Lake looking towards the northwest, and I'm just working my way over towards this end of the lake where things narrow down, and I'll be passing into another lake. So up ahead to the left of that orange triangle is where the path is from Indian Lake into the next lake, which is called Clear Lake. So across this gap here, they've got a tiny little ferry which can transport passengers and I guess vehicles as well over to this island over here. The only propulsion device that I can see on this ferry is a hand crank on either side, and it looks like it pulls a piece of chain which goes underneath the water to the other shore. So here's a look across at Clear Lake. Clear Lake's a fair bit smaller than Indian Lake, where I was just paddling through, and I'm not going to be in it for very long. I'm just heading towards that shoreline over there where there's a gap into the next lake. If you've seen my solo canoeing adventure on the Trent Severn Waterway series, you may recall that that waterway also has a clear lake along it. So the time is now about 8 a.m. and I paddled just under 4 kilometers, and I've pretty much reached those narrows, which will lead into the next lake, which is called Newboro Lake. But before I proceed into Newboro Lake, I'm going to take a break here in this calm section sheltered from the wind to have my breakfast. As usual, my breakfast this morning is an energizing bowl of campsite overnight oats with some orange juice to drink. So I'm finished my breakfast now, and I'm feeling all fueled up and ready to keep on paddling. And the sun is now shining quite brightly back there, so I put on my sunscreen. So this island straight ahead is called Goat Island, and over here to my right is my first look at Newboro Lake. Newboro Lake is another lake of many islands, and I'm pretty much paddling straight across it, heading over that way towards the Newboro Lock. The loons are singing for me this morning. They don't call them loons for nothing. So I'm continuing to work my way across the lake, and you can see there are quite a few more islands out this way too. So I've just reached the band of islands over here towards the north side of the lake, and I'm just going to pass in between these two to get over to that shoreline over that way. So I'm just coming around those islands now, and I'll work my way up that shoreline, because somewhere up that way is where the Newboro Lockstation is. So up ahead there between the green square and the red triangle is the entrance into the Newboro Lock. The way for remembering how the channel markers work is the phrase red right return. And that is to say, when you're returning, or in other words, you're going upstream, then you want the red markers to be on your right. So I've been paddling upstream for the last couple of days, but after I get past Newboro, I'll then be actually heading downstream because Newboro is the summit or home port of the Rideau Canal. So here I've arrived at lock number 36, Newboro, And I can see that there are a couple of boats inside the lock chamber already, so I guess I'll wait my turn before they let me inside. And they even have a sign there reminding boaters about how the channel markers change after you get past here. So I decided to tie up the canoe down there since it'll be a while before I'll be able to get into the lock here, because the water level is still at the top and they're going to let this houseboat down before they let me up. I can see that this lock has hydraulically controlled gates and valves, unlike the manually controlled ones that require manpower that I saw at the other lock stations so far on this trip. Newboro Lock also has this old military blockhouse. So you can see that houseboat's been lowered down and they've opened up the gates for it to go out, and I'm going to now head back over that way and get in the canoe so I can make my way into the lock chamber. Alright, so I'm back in the canoe and they've given me the go-ahead to paddle inside the lock. And there they're closing up those gates behind me. Again, these ones are controlled by hydraulics. They don't have to have a person pushing a big crank to close them. I can also see that these gates are made out of metal instead of wood, like I saw at all the other lock stations so far. So this is my second time visiting the Newboro Lock. I came here back during my May of 2019 bike tour of Central and Eastern Ontario and paid this lock station a quick visit. So here they've raised me just about up to the top of the lock, and there comes that hydraulically controlled gate. Up here at the top there are a bunch of boats that are mooring, as well as a tent that somebody's been using to camp here last night. So the water which is up ahead here is a man-made canal which was cut into the rock to join together these two lakes. All the water that I saw back behind me was part of the Cataraqui watershed, which ultimately flows down into Lake Ontario, where all the water which is ahead of me is part of the Rideau watershed, which flows into the Ottawa River. It's nice getting a break from the wind in the calmer waters of this canal. Up ahead there's a bridge for County Road 42, which looks like it's currently under construction. Just over this way to the right is the community of Newboro, and if you take that road in the other direction, it will take you to the community of Westport. It looks like there also used to be another bridge across the Narrows here, and another former bridge location up here too. So I've just about reached the end of this canal, and you can see that things open up into a lake, and this lake is called Upper Rideau Lake. So here's a look at Upper Rideau Lake, and like I mentioned before, the channel markers have now reversed. The red signals are now on the left, and I'm going to be making my way along this shoreline over here on the right, heading towards the next lock station, which is called the Narrows. Up there I can see some buzzards circling. Buzzards are also known as turkey vultures. So I'm just continuing my way along this shoreline here, and I pretty much have a crosswind as I'm working my way along here. And over that way you can see a peninsula, and just beyond that peninsula there's an arm of Upper Rideau Lake which continues in the west direction for about another 6 or 7 kilometers, and at the end of there's a community which is fittingly known as Westport. I had been considering that I might paddle to Westport today as a place where I could stop for my lunch, but I've decided against it because it would add an extra 13 kilometers to my day, and I was just there 2 years ago on that bike trip that I mentioned earlier. After those 2 cloudy days, it's just so nice to have a blue sky day like this, even though it's quite a windy day. So that community you can see down that way is Westport, and now that I've reached the part of the lake where it's wider, the wind definitely seems to be stronger. The wind direction for me is a crosswind, and I'm sure glad that I don't need to paddle straight into it to get to Westport. I can see a kayaker over there, and it looks like they've got the wind with them. Up ahead there's an island called Loon Island, and I'm planning on going around to the right of it, which should give me a little bit of a break from the wind. And it looks like the yellow kayaker has the same idea as me. So I had a chance to speak to that kayaker, and he too was appreciating the calmer waters here on this side of this island. And just beyond this point here you can see where things get windy again. So I need to basically shoot for that far point over that way so I can turn right and make my way towards the Narrows. So I'm just curving around to the right here, and over there in the distance I can see the Narrows lock station. And from here to there I should have favorable winds. So the reason why this lock station is called the Narrows is because it's built on a portion of Rideau Lake which was naturally narrow, but when they built the Rideau Canal, they built a dam across those Narrows, and that dam separated Rideau Lake into Upper Rideau Lake where I am right now, and Big Rideau Lake where I'm heading to. Over here on the right is the Narrows campground, which is where that kayaker told me that he was camping at. So here's a closer look at the Narrows lock, lock number 35, and through the channel there's a swing bridge which goes across it, and you can also see another one of those old historic stone block houses that was used by the military here. So as the waves push me closer to the Lockstation, the time is now 11:30 and I've paddled 16 kilometers so far today. So there's a closer look at that swing bridge, and I had the privilege of riding my bike across that bridge back on my tour of Eastern Ontario in September of 2019, and that bridge is actually a human-powered swing bridge. So my plan is that I'm going to stop here at this log station and get out to have my lunch, but because things are so choppy on this side, I'm going to wait to go through the log first and tie up the canoe on the other side. You can see there are a couple of boats inside the lock chamber, so I've got to wait until they let them out before I can go inside. So there you can see they're opening up those gates, but they're going to have to move the swing bridge out of the way because the boat inside there looks pretty tall. So the first step is for them to close the traffic gates on either side of the bridge. You can see this operator has inserted a crank into the middle and he's released a brake, and now he's starting to move the bridge under his own power. It's pretty neat the way they've maintained parts of the canal the way that it was many years ago. And here come those boats out of the lock. So here I've made my way inside the lock, and back behind me you can see that they're closing the swing bridge and starting to close the lock gates as well. So this is going to be the first time on this trip when I'm going to be going down in the lock instead of up in the lock. And because I'm going down instead of up, that means I'm able to park the canoe a little bit closer towards the front of the lock, because the issue of turbulence is no longer an issue because they're letting water out of the lock instead of letting water in. There you can see them opening up the drain valves for the lock chamber. Alright, so I've been lowered down to the bottom of the lock, and there they're opening up the gates so I can paddle out and make my way into Big Rideau Lake. So just on the other side of the lock, I've docked the canoe here, and my plan is to walk up that way and I'll have my lunch somewhere over there. So there's a look at that old blockhouse, which has been repurposed now as the restroom building here. So up here at the top of the lock, I found a nice sheltered area behind this building where it's not too windy, and my plan for lunch is to have this apple, which I've already started on, and because I've been having a lot of sandwiches lately, I decided to have this can of Irish stew for lunch. Alright, so I've finished my lunch now. Now to head over back that way, get into the canoe and begin paddling across Big Rideau Lake with the wind behind me. You may have noticed that the lock that's here in the Narrows is a relatively small one. It only has a lift of about 1 meter. And part of the reason for that is they didn't really originally plan on putting a lock here. The original plan was that they weren't going to break Rideau Lake up into the two separate parts with a dam through the middle. But the reason they decided to change the plan was because when they were blasting through the rock of that canal that I was going through earlier to get into Upper Rideau Lake, they found that the rock was a lot harder than they anticipated, and it was a lot of work. So it actually saved money to build this dam here and add an extra lock to raise the water level on that side up higher, to mean that they wouldn't need to, blast quite so deep for that canal. Another reason that's cited is that when they were building the Rideau Canal, there were many workers who were infected by malaria from being exposed to the swamps that were here before the dams were built to raise the water levels. So by adding this extra lock, they were effectively building things faster and exposing fewer workers to that disease. So here I'm back in the canoe and paddling my way in the east direction towards an island called Colonol By Island. The island is named after the man who was the mastermind of the Rideau Canal, and it's an island that's operated by Parks Canada, and that's where I'm planning on camping tonight. So straight ahead I can see an island which is called Sand Island, and just beyond there, Big Rideau Lake should really open up. As the name suggests, Big Rideau is the largest lake on the Rideau Canal system. So I'm just working my way along the north shore of this lake here, and you can see lots of cottages built atop the cliff. So I'm now just beyond Sand Island, and you can see how things open up, and you can see by the waves that the wind is definitely helping me this afternoon. So the time is now 1:15, and I've paddled 19 kilometers so far today. So I paddled further down along the shoreline, and over here on my right I'm approaching an island which is called Trout Island, that island right there, and straight ahead there's a cluster of islands, and I believe one of those islands is Colonol By Island where I'm heading to. I've been noticing a lot of the boats that are docked along this lake are being stored out of the water like that, and I think that's because it's not uncommon for Big Rideau Lake to be pretty windy with a lot of waves. So I'm starting to get closer to that cluster of islands, which collectively are known as Long Island. And looking over to the right of where I'm heading, over that way on that shoreline over there, is the community of Portland. So Colonel By Island is behind these islands that I can see straight ahead, but my plan is that I'm going to paddle through the sheltered waters in between the islands to get over there. So it looks like there's a passage through here that I should be able to take, or at least I hope there's a way through here. I see a lot of downed trees. It seems like I'll be able to get through. On the map, this area is labeled as Lost Lake. Well, I kind of feel like I've been transported to a different universe. There's virtually no wind inside of here, and everything's really calm and still and really beautiful. So I believe what I can see straight ahead is Colonel By Island, and I'm going to make a right turn up that way, because that's where I believe the dock for the island is. So the time is now about 2:15, and I've traveled 23.5 kilometers, and here I've arrived at the main dock for Colonel By Island. So I docked the canoe down there and I got out, and I've had a chance to walk around a little bit on this island to scope things out, and I think the area where I want to camp is back over that way, and there's actually another dock over there, so it's probably easier for me to get back in the canoe and paddle over to that dock instead to unload from there. Here's a look at the island over from this side, and that dock over there is where I'm heading for. Alright, so here I've got my stuff in the canoe out of the water, and my plan is to camp on that grass there, just in front of the old abandoned building. So I've got my stuff moved over onto the land there, and as I mentioned, there's this old abandoned building here, which is an old cottage that dates back to 1949, and it was built for a wealthy American entrepreneur named Danny Arnstein. Arnstein was at one time the owner of yellow cabs in New York and Chicago, and apparently he spent most of his summers here up until his death in 1960. At the time, this island was known as Livingston Island, but since Parks Canada has since taken it over, it's now of course known as Colonel By Island, and this building back here apparently has been designated as a historic site, but it seems to have just been kind of left here to rot. So the camping permits on this island are purchased on a self-serve basis, and you can see that it's $4.90 per night. So you write down your information on a form and you enclose your money in an envelope, and then that envelope goes inside this slot here. And then you keep the carbon copy as your receipt or proof of payment. So the time is now just after 3:30, and as you can see, I've got my tent pitched back here. So my plan for the rest of the afternoon now is to get a couple of things back in the canoe, and then I'm going to paddle back across that windy lake to the community of Portland, where I can stop and get some groceries and also stop and have some dinner. I believe they have some restaurants there. So I've already paddled 24 kilometers so far today, and Portland's going to be another 5 kilometers to get there, so I'm having a quick snack on this apple to tide me over. So there are a bunch of islands over there up ahead, and because the wind's coming from that direction there, I've decided to paddle on this side of them so that I'll be sheltered from the wind. In addition to being a dinner excursion, this is also an opportunity to get to see a little bit more of Big Rideau Lake. This big island here that's straight ahead is called Big Island. Which reminds me, when I'm paddling, I really like to listen to my portable AM/FM radio, and my favorite radio station so far on this trip is a classic rock station out of Kingston called Big FM. So straight up ahead between those two islands is the community of Portland where I'm heading. So there's another look over at the buildings of Portland, which get bigger and bigger as I paddle further. And I can certainly appreciate that Big Rideau Lake is a big lake. As the sun peeks out from behind a cloud, the buildings of Portland get even closer. I see there are quite a few yachts parked here in Portland. Alright, so the time is now 4:45, and here I've arrived in Portland, Ontario, and I've got the canoe up on the shore, and out of an abundance of caution I decided to lock it up against that post there, because without the canoe I would be stranded here. My first order of business is to find the grocery store, which should be up this street right here. Lots of nice old homes in this community. And here's the Portland Food Market grocery store, where I'm going to stop to stock up on a few things. So I was able to stock up on lots of things to have for future meals, but now to find some food to have for tonight's meal. I think I'll try the Portland Family Restaurant Pizzeria. So I was able to find this nice shaded seat here on the patio, and I decided to order a chicken Caesar salad because I figured I probably haven't had quite enough vegetables so far today, and a chocolate milk to drink. Well, that was a delicious meal. That Caesar salad really hit the spot. I'd love to spend more time wandering around this little town, but the time is almost 6 p.m. and I still have 5 kilometers to paddle back to the campsite. So I'm back here at the public docks, and the canoe is still locked where I left it. So the time is now 6 p.m. and I'm back in the canoe, ready to battle the wind and the waves on Big Rideau Lake. I believe that landmass which is straight ahead is Big Island, but my plan is to follow along this shoreline for the first little while so that I can be a little bit sheltered from the wind before I cross to that other side of Big Island and get the shelter from it. Similar to how things looked this morning when I started paddling, everything looks really picturesque around this time of night. Just one loon this time. So I paddled a bit closer to Big Island, and there's a smaller island over here which has a really interesting looking structure on it. So this small little island has a dilapidated old boathouse and this very unusual looking stone building. The construction of it looks kind of similar to a blockhouse, but it's cylindrical instead of square, and also quite small. So there's a closer look at it, and the island that it sits on is actually called Tower Island, which I'm sure was named after this tower. So having come this far paddling into the wind, I think I'm just going to stay on the left side of Big Island instead of going all the way over there to the right. So here I've reached the shores of Big Island. Now I'm going to curve around that way to the right to see the other side of Big Island. I'm now paddling next to an island called Cordwood Island, and that island straight ahead with the flagpole is where I'm heading to. So I'm just about there now, and when I paddled out to Portland, I paddled over on the other side of all these islands here, so it's been nice having different scenery on my return trip. Uh-oh, it looks like my tent is on fire. It's just an optical illusion though. There's a barbecue behind where my tent is. Alright, so here I've made it back to Colonol By Island, where I set up my campsite earlier. And over here you can see that barbecue that my neighbors are using right now. My neighbors who are staying on that boat over there. And as you can see, I've got the canoe out of the water, and before I do anything else, there's something I've really been wanting to do. So after my swim in the lake, I decided to take the opportunity to rinse off my bathing suit in the lake, as well as 2 of my shirts. So there are a couple more things that I still want to do over at my campsite, but I figured while there's still daylight, I might as well sign off for today's video. So it was another good day of paddling. My total distance was 34.1 kilometers, which beats my record, or actually it ties my record for longest distance solo paddled in a canoe. But the last time that I paddled that distance was on my Trent Severn Waterway trip, and it was when I was coming down the Otonabee River, and I had the wind behind me and I had a strong current in the river, so that was definitely much more favorable than today. I said in the end of my video from yesterday that day was really dominated by wind, but the wind yesterday didn't compare at all to the wind that I had today. It definitely was much stronger today, and when I had seen the forecast saying that the wind would be coming from the west, I thought, oh, that'll be good, because I knew that, a good part of my day would be, coming west, from the Narrows. What I didn't consider though was the fact that a lot of my day was kind of coming north before I got to the Narrows, and that meant that I was, had a crosswind, which actually makes, paddling quite a bit more challenging, because you really have to sort of work to keep your bow pointing, in the direction that you want to go, where the waves are kind of pushing it to the side, away from where you want it to go. So I really enjoyed my visit to Portland this evening. I'll be honest, when I first arrived here at this campsite, I was kind of, I always had sort of thought that that's what I would do for dinner. But when I got here, after paddling through that big windy lake, I was kind of thinking, maybe I'll just stay here and have my packaged foods instead, just because I knew that it would be a lot more of that sort of, side wind, sort of crosswind paddling to get there just for dinner. And I thought, well, I've had packaged foods, why don't I just stay here? But I'm really glad I battled those waves and went there, because, I'd never been to Portland before, and, just nice to see another little small town, and I really enjoyed my dinner as well, and of course, stocking up on a few grocery items. So I'm looking forward to my day of paddling tomorrow. Tomorrow should hopefully be similar to today. I'm planning on, paddling to where I'm going to camp, and then I'm hopefully going to go on some kind of an excursion to go and get my dinner. But of course, the weather could change my plan, so I guess we will wait and see. So stay tuned for video number 4, but I hope you enjoyed joining me for day number 3 today. If you watched all the way to the end of this video, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below, and thanks for watching.